Hello and welcome back to Coding with Kenji. This is the beginner series, and in this episode we are going to prepare in our script the functionality required to be able to fire a bullet from our turret. That's a little bit more involved, so I expect that this video will take a little bit longer to set up everything, but let's get going. Okay, so we are gonna open up our turret scene here. Let's see. Okay, the first thing that we need, because I forgot to make that when we made the turret, well, we're gonna need a bullet or a cannonball that this guy fires. So in the turret scene, in the hierarchy on the left side here, right click, and this one I'm just gonna make into a 3D object sphere. Place it at 0, 0, 0. Okay, so this is this game object is gonna be called a bullet. So press F2 to rename the game object in the scene. And we are just going to have to try to scale it down to size. So I'm just gonna move the gizmo towards the cannon muzzle so that the game object is a little bit closer. We're gonna reset the position of this guy afterwards, but I'm just gonna center it approximately at the center of the muzzle. And then I'm gonna click R to select the scaling tool, and then I'm gonna scale this guy down to something that looks fairly sensible. We also need to check that this object, this ball object, is visible in the game camera. You see, we are now working with very arbitrary scales of things. This does not we just need to make sure that in our context of the game world that things look okay, that the bullet isn't giant compared to the turret object and stuff like that, but still visible in the game camera, which this is. So we'll call that okay for now. I'm actually gonna instead of having like this scaling of many decimals, I'm just gonna go and set it to 0.35 exactly on each axis. There we go, that's nicer. Then we're gonna apply a material to this bullet. So in the project view, in the materials folder, actually inside the turret folder, we're gonna create a material. So I'm right clicking inside of the folder in the project view, select material, and we're gonna call this bullet. And then from the project view, we're gonna drag and drop the bullet material onto the bullet game object in the hierarchy view. That will assign the material to the bullet. Then like in the previous episode where we set up the turret, I'm just gonna give this a very distinct what can you say, dangerous color to something reddish, so it's very visible in the scene when we are firing a bullet. Okay, that's it. And then I'm just gonna zero out the position of this game object, and then we're gonna make it into a prefab. So in the project view, in the prefabs folder, open up the turret folder, and then I'm gonna select the bullet in the hierarchy of the scene and drag and drop it into the folder in order to create a prefab of the bullet. Good. That means that we can now delete the bullet game object from the scene, because that one is going to be created or spawned, instantiated is not a word, at runtime. Okay, cool. So that's the prefab for a bullet setup. Now we're gonna go into scripting. So we're gonna open up the the turret script here. You can actually open it from a game object. So if I select the turret game object in the hierarchy, then I can double click the turret script here in the inspector, and it'll open it up in Visual Studio. We're just going to keep this dirty code here for now, but we are going to clean all of this stuff up in a bit. But now, after you learn to create code and functions with parameters and variables, now we are starting to get somewhere. Now we can actually start doing things. So first of all, up top here, where we keep our variables, we're going to add another variable. Actually, well, okay, for now, yes, for now, we are going to change this a little bit later, but I'm going to show you something. First of all, we're going to create a variable called public game object with a big capital letter G, and we're gonna call this bullet prefab. Public game object bullet prefab. Remember, camel case on variables. And this one is not assigned a default value like we are doing at the top here, where we're saying equal something. Right now, this guy is empty. It's a so-called null variable. Null. That's a new word. It means unassigned, non-existent, null. Okay, so back in, we are going to save this script. Control-Shift-S, go back to Unity, and let the code compile. Now, see, the thing is that prefabs are a little bit special. This is another thing that you have to learn. It is importantes. When we are working with prefabs, you know, we want the change to be made to the prefab itself. I'll show you. Okay, in the prefabs folder, we have the turret folder, and inside of there's the turret prefab. In Unity, when you double click a turret, a prefab object in the project view, you're gonna open up the prefab view. This is essentially a special view where we can edit the object directly and sort of save the change, so that any the change that we are making in prefab edit view is the thing that is being saved into the prefab itself here. And here, with the inside of the prefab view, with the turret object selected at the top in the hierarchy here, we are going to assign the new bullet prefab that we just made down here in the project view. This means that in the prefab itself, we have saved a reference. This is a reference to a prefab in our project, which is the bullet prefab. Yeah. So in order to save this change, it saved automatically. If I click the back button at the upper left here in the hierarchy inspector here, I exit prefab edit mode. Now we can, if we in the turret scene, right here, turret scene, if I click the turret object here, we will now see that the bullet prefab is applied here. So the bullet prefab that we have in the project view is now applied in the prefab. The important thing to learn about prefabs is that if you do a local change in the scene hierarchy, I'm gonna do an example now to display what we're doing. I select the turret object in the scene view here, in the turret scene, and I'm gonna just click the bullet in input field here for the bullet prefab and click delete. Now this change happened only in the local scene here, but if I actually select the turret prefab object saved in our project, in the project view, we'll see that the bullet prefab here is still assigned. This is a very, very important thing to understand between what's called a local change and a prefab. So you don't want to edit certain things directly in the scene view anymore. We want to edit it at the prefab level unless we are doing what's called local changes. I know that this is a little bit tricky to understand at first, but just bear with me. So if I delete the turret outer scene here, and then I drag the turret game object into the scene again, we'll see that the bullet prefab has a value assigned. Okay, this is a very typical beginner mistake where you're editing an object in the scene view directly, but then the change isn't applied into the prefab. If we want to edit the prefab, then we can open the prefab context directly from the scene view using this little button here, the arrow button. Then we open this object up in prefab mode. Okay, so I'm just gonna position the turret correctly again. So it's at 0 on the x-axis, 0 on y, and -4 on the z-axis. That is the same as it was before. Okay, so we have a bullet prefab ready to go. We have set up our turret prefab so that we have a reference to this bullet. Now we're gonna go back into the turret script. And then we are going to create a function. Okay. Because I want to teach you functions and parameters before doing this, because this is now where we are creating an actual proper function for firing our bullet. For now, this function is going to be public. We don't care about the access modifiers for now. We can deal with that in a later episode. So public void fire bullet. Remember Pascal case for functions. Now I'm going to end this with the function parentheses and then curly braces. So I haven't added parameters to this function yet, but excuse me, there are several things that we need to know when we are firing a bullet. And we're going to write this out with parameters. So when we're calling the fire bullet function, the function needs to know a few things. First of all, we're going to write, this is a new data type that you have not learned yet. I think this is called a vector3. A vector3 is a data object that contains 3 floating point variables. Essentially, I'm just going to go back to Unity and show you. When things have a position, they have an X, a Y, and a Z, because that's 3-dimensional. Yeah? Right and left, up and down, forward and backwards. This is one vector3, so that's called a position vector 3. So we're gonna take in as a parameter in the fire bullet function a vector 3 of, to be very distinct, bullet spawn position. Maybe that's enough for now. And then I'm going to write a comment here so I keep track of what we're trying to do. We are now going to instantiate a bullet game object at the spawn position sent to us as parameter. Okay. So now we're going to learn a new special code line. This is a Unity thing, like a Unity built-in functionality, and that is called instantiate. Instantiate. That means essentially you're spawning something. You're creating something out of thin air and entering it into the game world. This is a function. So instantiate, open and close parentheses, and inside of that function it expects a few things. See here. If you see where my mouse cursor is, there is a little helper box here where this instantiate function have very many different versions of the function that takes in different types of amount of parameters. So we're gonna scroll down here a little bit to one that takes 3 parameters. We're gonna send it the object something something, right, that we are spawning, and then it's gonna take in a position that we're gonna send in, and then it's gonna take in a rotation. Okay, so let's see here. We are going to instantiate this bullet prefab that we have as a variable up top. So bullet prefab, comma, because now we're talking to the next parameter, which is the position. then we're gonna write the parameter that we send in here, because that's where we actually want to spawn the bullet in the 3D game world. So we're gonna write bullet spawn position, and then we write another comma because there is yet another parameter to fill here. It's asking us for a rotation that this object that we are spawning is gonna be in. Remember that we are spawning a sphere, and it doesn't really have anything special with it. Like it doesn't really matter to us what rotation the item is. But we are now going to write write bullet prefab dot transform dot rotation. I'm gonna go through what all of this stuff means. But we also need to make this work. So before we are using this function here, the fire bullet, we need one more variable. So I'm gonna scroll up top and I'm gonna make another variable. We're gonna call this public transform. The transform is the component of any game object. The transform holds the position, the rotation, and the scale of the object that we are referencing. I'll show you. So public transform bullet spawn position, or maybe even better to be very distinct, bullet spawn position transform. Now I'm typing it out very distinctly so that you really understand what's going on here. Bullet spawn position transform. Okay, we need to assign this variable a value. So I'm gonna save this script, Control-Shift-S, go back into Unity, and remember the little discussion that we had where we need to assign variables not in the scene view, but we want to do it in the prefab view. So with the turret selected, I'm going to press the little arrow next to it to open prefab edit mode. Now we are in prefab edit mode. We see that by a little blue box up here that denotes that we're in prefab edit mode. And previously, in the previous episode where we set up the turret, we created a game object called bullet spawn point. This guy right here. And we place that guy a little bit in front of the muzzle because that's where we are going to spawn or instantiate a bullet, okay? So again, select the turret root object at the top where we have our script. With that selected, hold and drag the bullet spawn point, hold and drag over to the variable for bullet spawn position transform. Now, Unity does something really cool. It takes the game object bullet spawn point here, and it finds its transform component here. You see here where my mouse is, on the upper right in the inspector. Because it knows that this variable here wants a transform. Hey, can somebody insert a transform component into this variable slot. Unity understands that when we drag and drop the game object onto that variable slot. So now, after applying this in edit prefab mode, we can click the back button, and then you will see that this has now been applied to the object. Okay, 25 minutes, huh? That's how it is. It's tricky to get through this in a speedy enough time, but also so that you understand what's going on. Okay, so we managed to have a variable for the spawn position where we are going to instantiate a bullet. And we have made a function called fire bullet down here that takes in a bullet spawn position as a parameter. And then inside we are calling a special Unity function called instantiate. We are going to do more with this function in the next episode, but for now let's demonstrate that this works. So down in the start function here, below all the get introduction stuff that we have been doing with the strings and learning function parameters, below the debug.logs, I'm now going to call the function called fire bullet. So fire bullet, large capital letters, and then it's going to take in a bullet spawn position. So what we're going to need to send in is the bullet spawn position transform, but I need to show you something here. I'm going to write bullet spawn position transform dot position. Okay, and end that with a semicolon. Now, we are going to save this script, and we're going to demonstrate that it works in Unity, and then I'm going to explain what happens with the code. Okay, so go back to Unity after saving the script. Wow, it took a long time compiling here. There we go. Okay. With the game view opened, now there's not a bullet here before we press play. But when we press play, we expect that there will be a bullet, this red ball, that will be spawned or instantiated in front of the turret muzzle. So let's press play. And correctly, we see that there is indeed a bullet that was actually spawned, created, a clone of a prefab at runtime. Yeah, this is how it works. So we managed to instantiate a ball. Currently it's not moving or not doing anything because we haven't told it to. We need to do that through script. But before we end this episode, I want to go through the code properly and explain each thing that we are doing. First of all, in the code here, for this episode we created two new things. We created a variable called public game object with a capital G called a bullet prefab, and we created a public transform variable called bullet spawn position transform, and we had to assign these variables values in Unity. So we had to slot in the bullet prefab that we created into the slot in edit prefab mode, and then we had to enter the cannon muzzle bullet spawn point into the bullet spawn point transform variable, yeah, up here. So these two guys. Then we created a function called fireBullet that takes in a parameter where in the 3D world to spawn the bullet. Okay, so down in the start function, we actually call the function fireBullet, and we're sending in the bullet spawn position transform. But before, this does not contain just the position. The transform component has several things. It has dot position or dot scale, local scale, or dot rotation. So it contains several properties within the transform class, or actually, yeah. So that's why we had to write bullet spawn position transform dot position, because right now we are interested in the position component inside of the transform. And this position is a vector 3. This is a struct or a variable containing 3 floats. So for an x, a y, and a z. And then we are sending that in as parameter to the function fireBullet. That takes in the parameter. And inside of the function, we are calling a special Unity function that is built into Unity called instantiate, meaning that we are now creating something, a game object, into the game world at runtime during play. So the instantiate function has many different versions of it. If you see in the box below here, it says +12 overloads. There are many different versions of the instantiate function, but we use the one where it has where we only send in a game or an object to spawn into the game world. That's the first parameter here. The bullet prefab, the variable that we have upstairs. Then we separate it by comma. So the next parameter that we are sending in to the instantiate function, that's the bullet spawn position, where in the world this item should be spawned. We are receiving that position from a parameter of our function. Yeah. So that's what we're sending into the instantiate function, and then separating by comma, and then we're just setting the bullet prefab dot transform dot rotation. So that's the rotation that the object that we are spawning in the world will have. In our case with the bullet, it doesn't matter really what rotation it has, because it's a sphere. Okay. I hope that this was fairly clear. Right now we are only instantiating this bullet when we are running the start function, which only happens once. So obviously we want to control this by some sort of input, clicking a button. And that will be in the next episode. So thank you for watching, and like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode.